Good morning. Happy Friday. I've been reviewing some of your questions that you guys had on the Ed puzzle that you did yesterday. The quick 4-minute Ed puzzle that covered what to expect on the day of the exam and just kind of like the different options on how to upload your response. So I've been responding to everyone individually on your Ed puzzle for your questions. I think I have one class left. So if you want to go back and look at your um, Ed puzzle, I did respond to each one of you individually if you had a question. But I want to go over some general questions that I saw repeated several times just so we can get them out of the way. So if you're on Google Classroom, a couple people asked where the DBQ rubric is. So here's the stream, right? You're going to click on the classwork section, and it's right here at the top. Under AP Exam Review, I have the AP Euro 2020 DBQ rubric. Okay, so this is important because this year's rubric will look different than any other rubric that you'll take for a history AP exam. So this is what the rubric looked like. A lot of you ask if there is a required length for your response. So remember, the DBQ is a document-based question. So you will be answering and addressing a single question using 5 documents to support your answer to that question. Okay. So there's a series of things that you need to do when you're looking at the question. So you have 50 minutes in total, so 45 minutes for writing and 5 minutes to upload your document. So, and then the 5 documents that you'll need to be reading, really, if you think about it, if it takes you 2 minutes to read each document, to think through what they're saying, what the purpose of those documents are, um, you want to think purpose, if they're a primary or secondary source. So when you look at purpose, you want to think about the author of the document. You want to think about the point of view, who is this document written for? And then, so that way when you go into writing it, you have certain things that you need to hit with those documents. So if that takes you 2 minutes per document, that's already 10 minutes right there. So that leaves you for 35 minutes for writing. But if you are able to structure the beginning part as quickly as possible, you might need less time to actually fill in your writing. So I really recommend 3 paragraphs will probably be sufficient to answer your question. You could do 4 if you wanted, but really it's more about hitting all the components that they want you to rather than how much you write. So you could easily do it in 3 paragraphs. They don't have to be the world's best 3 paragraphs as long as they hit the points that they're asking for. So that first paragraph, your introductory paragraph, I really think you should focus on right off the start. You want to make sure that you add some contextualization. Think about the upside down pyramid that we talked about when we worked on our DBQs. So you want to start out a little bit broader, set the time period, the tone of the paper, provide some background knowledge of the time period or the event or thing you're going to be discussing. And then get the last sentence will be your thesis statement. So it'll get more specific as you go on in your introductory paragraph. And then your body paragraphs will really focus on supporting that thesis statement using the documents in several different ways, which we'll go over in just a second. So as you can see, then the rubric contextualization is a point here. So the total points will be 10. That's how they're doing it out of 10. So the contextualization is a single point. So the response must relate to the topic of the prompt, to broader historical events, developments, or process that occur before, during, or continue after the time frame of the question. This point is not awarded for merely a phrase or reference. Okay, so you can simply start out, it's the easiest place to start contextualization in your introductory paragraph. That's not simply the only time you're going to mention it. You will also link back to that in your body paragraphs. But if you start off with contextualization in your introductory paragraph, you'll naturally continue on that throughout your paper. If you try to shove it in somewhere else, it'll seem more like a phrase or just an afterthought, and you won't get the point there. So you want it to start out from the beginning and flow throughout. So in order to get the point. Um, Contextualization really shows that you understand the topic in order to get that point. But we'll come back to that in a second. So in your thesis statement, it responds to the prompt with a historically defensible thesis claim that establishes a line of reasoning. So your thesis statement is a direct argument or answering the question that's being presented. So if you think back and to some of the other things that we did, like we did one on the Renaissance DBQ packet, we did one on the Mary Wollstonecraft packet. The most recent one we did was the industrialization. So whatever it says, if it talks about showing maybe discuss women's rights within the 19th century, um, like how they changed or whatever it's asking, you have your claims in your thesis statement. Okay. So you need to have specific claims. You don't want to just say that, women's lives were changed socially and politically. You need to say specifically what changed socially and what changed politically to defend those points in your body paragraphs. Just think about this. AP readers don't like big statements. They want a specific statement so that you have specific thoughts and examples to support those statements, if that makes sense. Okay, so the thesis statement must consist of one or more sentences located in one place, either in the introductory or the conclusion. Your time constraint is 45 minutes to write. You do not need a conclusion. You don't get points for it. So it's just being redundant anyway. So just forget about the conclusion and focus on the introductory and body paragraphs. So you will put your thesis in the introductory paragraph, and I would practice putting it in the last sentence or two of your introductory paragraph. Okay, it has to be an introductory paragraph. It will not count if your thesis statement is in your body paragraphs. Okay, so that's the point here. The only reason most people get a point for a thesis, the only way you will not get a point for the thesis, again, if it's too vague, like this, which says the thesis must make a claim that responds to the prompt rather than merely restating or rephrasing the prompt. So you don't just rephrase the prompt, but you actually make a claim towards the prompt, a statement. So that's where people lose points. And then also the vague statements, if you just say something impacts an event impacts, let's say, a nation, and you try to put it in broad categories like socially and politically, and that's fine to say, but you have to say it impacted socially through like different social classes and politically by allowing more people to vote or something. You have to have specific claims there. Okay, now getting on to our documents. So the 5 documents you have to use in a couple different ways. So the first part is accurately describes the content of at least 2 documents to address the topic of the prompt. Quotes are insufficient to earn this point. Okay, so you have to describe the documents here, at least 2. This is 1 point here. So with your thesis statement, if you have 2 points, right? So you'll have 2 body paragraphs. So one body paragraph will cover the first point that you make or arguing, and the second body paragraph will cover the second point that you're arguing. So let's say that first paragraph, you could easily hit this point if you wanted. You could describe 2 documents that defend your point. So accurately describes the content of at least 2 documents to address the topic of the prompt. So you use 2 documents to support either both claims, both separate points in your thesis statement, or the one singular point. It doesn't really matter as long as you describe 2 documents. Okay. So it's easy. You can split this up if you wanted. You could describe one document in one paragraph, and you can do another document in the second paragraph. It doesn't matter as long as you describe 2 that address your thesis statement. So that's a singular point here. So any of the boxes that don't have numbers, those are single points. So that's 3 points off the bat here. And then we have, this is where a lot of the points come from, 6 points right here, and then a singular point down here. So the next part is supports an argument in response to the prompt using at least 2 or 4 documents. Okay, so in order to get the full 2 points, you have to use 4 documents. So I'd recommend using the 4 documents. These documents should meet and exceed the standard set for the description point. So it supports an argument in response. So this first part just describes the document. Okay, so basically stating what is the document saying? Okay, what is it? Has related to the topic. This one is supports your argument, so directly is connected back to your thesis statement, and you have to do that in 4 documents. So you can use each document more than once, like for these 2, for example, but for this one, you have to do it for 4 documents. You have to use 4 documents to support your thesis statement, and then you have to describe 2 documents, okay, and link it back to your thesis statements. So this one is more specific, covering the first part, covering the documents. This one is more on how does it relate to your thesis statement. And then the next point is for 1 or 2 documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience is relevant to an argument. Okay, so here you want to hit 2 documents. Whenever it says 1 or a lower amount or a bigger amount, like so 1 or 2, you always want to go for 2. You always want to go for 4. That way you're already trying to hit the most points possible. And if you, because if you only go for 2 and you mess up on one of them, you only get the 1, you'll get 0 points. If you go for 4 and maybe you mess up on one of them, you'll at least get 1 out of the 2 points for the support section. Okay, so describe, supports, explains. So in the explanation part, you're really talking about the document's point of view. Okay, so this covers the author, okay, the purpose. So who is the author? Basically, you're talking about bias. And you can't just say that it's bias, you have to explain how this document could be biased, okay? Then you have to explain the purpose of the document. So the purpose of the document was, why was it written? What were they hoping to get out of it? This also is very easily linked to the intended audience. Okay, were they trying to hit a certain target area? Was it propaganda? Okay. And then the historical situation, like what's going around this time period when this document was written, that links into the purpose as well as the audience. So when you think about, if you go back to our silent discussion, when we did, was Napoleon, was he like basically a good leader, or was he trying to do it for his own ambition? So we looked at several series of documents. Remember, some were primary. Oh, I think all of them were primary actually, but some of them were written directly by Napoleon, and some of them were written by other people about Napoleon. So the people that wrote the document about Napoleon, what was their reasoning for writing that document? Were they trying to gain favor of Napoleon? Were they opposition of Napoleon? Was this document used for like the masses? Was it for a subset of people? So that's what you're really thinking about when you're looking at the documents. So you have to use the documents in 3 different ways to get these points here, okay? So we have this little box here. I recommend you having this, printing out this rubric and having it in front of you on the day of the exam. So you will, that way when you're going through, you can number your documents here. And then you could just check off as you describe it, as you support it, and then as you explain it, okay? So use specific historical evidence beyond what is found in the documents, relevant to an argument about the prompt. So 1 per example, up to 2 points. So specific historical evidence beyond what is found in the documents. So you'll use the documents to help you place what's going on in the time period, but then you should also bring in outside information surrounding the document time periods in order to get this point, okay? And then to further that, so continuing with this, the response must describe the evidence and must use more than a phrase or reference. This additional piece of evidence must be different from the evidence used to earn the point for contextualization. So You can't simply bring up the time period going around that you mentioned up here in your introductory paragraph for your contextualization here. It has to be different. And we'll get into this and show some examples in a minute. I have a good video for you guys that breaks down a document. But this is specific historical evidence beyond what is found in the documents. Okay. And then the demonstrates a complex understanding of the historical development that is the focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, or modify an argument that addresses the question. Okay, so let's get into this. This is what we call the unicore point. I had mentioned this in class before. The response must demonstrate a complex understanding, which must be part of the argument and not merely a phrase or reference. So this can include explaining nuance by analyzing multiple variables, explaining both similarity and difference, both continuity and change, or multiple causes, or both causes and effects. Okay, so you could be talking about a particular event. Let's go back to last year's DBQ. Last year's DBQ covered the Catholic Church and the Scientific Revolution. Okay, so basically the prompt was asking, did the Catholic Church support the Scientific Revolution? So there's a series of documents, and you could answer it either way as long as you use the documents to support your answer. So for this one, you could use continuity and change over time. You could talk about, to get this unicorn point, how if your argument was initially it did not support the scientific revolution, but then you could say in another part of your paragraph or towards the end, however, 200 years later, and provide some examples. The Catholic Church created this document that shows that they changed their reasoning, and they did support a lot. They ended up supporting a lot of the things that came out of the scientific revolution. So that shows that you know a larger period of time. You're linking it back to your original, but you're providing how it can change over time. You can also talk about the things that happened before the scientific revolution that influence whatever the Catholic Church's response, that you're arguing response to the scientific revolution, to show the cause and effects. And you can provide, this is where you can also provide insightful connections across time periods. You could do that here. If the question was about Napoleon, you could bring in some later on information that looking back, that showed Napoleon was a great leader and that other people used a lot of his strategic military plans later on in time. So that would be making connections across time. You could provide, so there's a couple of different ways to get this point here, the unicore point. Okay. But it does have to be different from your historical evidence. Your historical evidence be specific for that time period. Okay, and then the unicore point is more talking about on a larger scale, connecting other things to the time period and events that you're talking about, if that makes sense. We'll break this down more and more as we go on. Really familiarize yourself with the rubric. So when you start the exam, you know what you need to hit. You can just initially focus on reviewing the documents real quick and thinking about how you can use the documents, what argument you want to come up with, how you want to start bucketing the documents in your arguments. So if your thesis statement has 2 points, right? So a body paragraph for each point, you want to figure out which documents can go with which points, and how you'll use them in the different paragraphs. So you'll use 2 documents to support your first point you can appear in your first body paragraph. Then you can use 2 documents for the support area. So first, describe 2 documents connecting to your first point. How does it support your first point? Okay. And then what are the point of view, purpose, audience, etc. of that, of those two documents linking to your thesis statement. And then you can provide in some contextualization in there as well, especially with this last point here. For the explanation, when you cover the point of view, purpose, and audience, and then you extend beyond that, really showing your knowledge here of the time period is how you can further connect the contextualization for this explanation point. And then in your second body paragraph, you do the same thing. You have your second point, you have two documents that you use to describe, okay, connecting it back to that second point. Then you have your two documents, because you already did two in the previous, so two different ones down for supports, okay, totaling four. You support your argument, okay. How do these documents support your second point? And then those other documents, your second point, the point of view, purpose, any bias. You can't just simply say a document is biased. You have to explain why there's bias in it, because every document can have some bias in it. Each time you make a point, make sure that you elaborate on that point. Don't just simply state something and then connect it to nothing. It goes nowhere. Like Napoleon was a brilliant military leader and had many victories. Okay, that's your statement. But the next sentence, or you can continue that sentence, should say, well, what did he do that made him a brilliant military leader? Like, what was his tactics? And then what did he accomplish? Okay, how far did he expand his empire? You need to provide information that goes beyond that. Just don't simply say a statement without including any facts or examples. So once you finish writing, I would try to get through each point, and hopefully you have a few minutes to go back and make sure that you expanded all of your points, have some type of example, or go beyond just simply a statement that doesn't do anything, that doesn't add to your overall argument. And then you can maybe add in from there. But if you don't have time, I mean, it is what it is. The time constraint is going to be the hardest thing, because you could write a great DBQ paper in an hour and a half or as much time as you need, right? The hardest part will be doing it in 45 minutes, because it's a lot to think through, to process, and then starting writing it on paper. Remember, it doesn't need to be the most beautiful paper you've ever written. Just answer, hit all the points that you need. I've seen several DBQ answers. Some are pretty well written. Some are kind of like all over the place or really choppy, but they did what they needed to get the points. So while the paper on its face isn't great writing, they got the points because they used the documents the way that they needed to get the most points possible. So again, really familiarize yourself with this rubric and make sure you have it out in front of you when you're writing. The second thing is, a lot of you asked about time for the test. So it's the same time for everybody. Our test is on Wednesday, May 13th, European history. We're Eastern time on the East Coast, 4 o'clock. Okay. College Board says that you should log in 30 minutes prior to the exam. That way you're logged in, there's no issues uploading or connecting. Okay, so 30 minutes is your stop. You should all be logged in 30 minutes. So by 3:30, you should be logged in to AP College Board. I also recommend, a lot of people, you asked about notes, what notes you should use. Is it open note? So yes, it's open note. Yes, you can have tabs open. There is no lockdown browser. However, a College Board and myself really recommends that you, because of that time constraint, you will not have time to start searching through things. So I'm going to go over what I recommend. I posted this is where you'll find all of your study guides, okay, that you're going to complete and hopefully turn in by today. And then this is the detailed outline that I was talking about. Some people asked for the outline. It's right here. I'm going to open it up. So what I recommend is looking at your study guides as well as the outline. First, I would review your outlines. First, figure out the areas that you are the least comfortable with. You just say, you know what, I don't really remember a whole lot about the Renaissance and the difference between the Renaissance in Italy versus the Northern Renaissance. Okay. Then that's what you should have your notes on. Pick some topic areas that you're not that comfortable with and create what I'm going to call like your cheat sheet. Well, it's not really cheating because it's OpenNote, but your cheat sheet to reference when you're taking the test. So you should have your rubric, and I reckon one single sheet. You could have it back in front if you want, but you will not have time to scroll or search through like 20 pages of notes. Okay. So figure out what time periods or concepts that you're the least familiar with, and you can scroll through this outline here to see what areas that you're the weakest in, and that's what I recommend condensing and putting on your cheat sheet. Okay. As a quick reference, use the documents. A lot of the documents will have information that will help you with at least kind of what's going on in the time period. But again, to hit those outside points outside of the documents, like for contextualization, the unicore point, you will need to know information beyond what is presented in the documents. So that's a good idea to have your cheat sheet in front of you with information of the topic areas you're not as familiar or strong with. Again, it could be back and front. I really don't recommend more than one sheet just because you don't want to spend. I know 2 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're spending 2 minutes every time you're trying to come up with a point, looking it up, that adds up very quickly and takes away from your writing. Okay. So make sure you look at the detailed outline here, as well as your um, study guides, which is here. So everything you need for the review will be under this AP exam review section. You can also look on the side here, AP exam review, click on it, and it'll bring up all these points. We're going to be practicing some example DBQs for next week. I'm going to have multiple sessions every day next week. I'm going to send out a sign up genius. We'll probably do it one during my office hour at 3 and one at 1 o'clock. So we'll do one at 1 and one at 3, and you'll sign up for the time that you want to come in. I'll answer questions, and then we'll go over a practice DBQ together. We'll go over how we'll have the rubric. So I recommend you having that printed out or up on your screen. And we'll look at the practice DBQ and how we can use it to hit all the points. There's a couple of practice things that I have that we'll also go over. Like if you just don't understand what contextualization is, I have this good thing here on tips about the skills. So basically what you should do is describe an accurate historical contents for a specific historical development or process. So so basically what that means is what was happening at the time of the event when that it occurred, or the document was written / created that might have had an influence on this time period. So historians examine the historical context or events to understand why things happened the way that they did. Context is different from causation, and then instead of focusing on specific events or actions that may have caused another event to occur, historians refer to context as a larger constellation of developments and process that may not have served as a specific cause, but may still have had influence an event. In other words, the context of an event often influences its course, even if it did not cause the event. Okay, so for example, you could be talking about the Reformation, right? And you could be talking about like the printing press and different things like that. So cause would be if your argument would be that the printing press caused the Reformation, but you could also talk about other events that's going on at the time that influenced the Reformation. So you could talk about that the Renaissance really had a great impact on the way people started thinking. Um, Humanism maybe didn't cause Reformation, but it certainly influenced what was going on later in the period. Okay, so this is what we're looking for contextualization. Things that set up an event maybe didn't have a direct impact, but it definitely influenced the event or time period that's occurring. Okay. So we have a little bit about compare and contrast. So you're looking at both the similarities and the differences, right, on a topic. And then we also have causation. So causation is describes causes or effects of a specific historical development or process. So, what were the reasons for this event? The factors that contribute to the specific pattern or trends. So, causation. This is what you practiced when you did your World War One post the other day. You looked at the different things that may have caused the World War One to start. Now, some of them had a bigger impact on World War One than others. A lot of you had mentioned that the alliances was something that caused World War One because there was an issue with Serbia, and had the alliances not been there, it would have just been a two-nation war versus a lot of Europe that was kind of forced into going to war on behalf of different nations because of the alliances. But then you also want to think about, well, what caused the alliances in the first place? Why did they create these alliances? Okay. Um, so that might be an immediate effect, the alliances, but then what was going on? This is where you would get like your unicorn point. What was going on previous to that that made European nations create these alliances in the first place? Okay. And then a lot of you talked about nationalism and imperialism. So if you brought any of those components in, then you would just need to explain your rationalization for why those would be causation for World War One. So these are just another skill that could be asked if it was about this topic in your DBQ in order to get that that unicorn point. So in order to kind of remember the ways that you need to use the documents for your DBQ, there's a couple of different acronyms to help you. We're going to look at HIP. So we have basically you need to hit your historical context. So what was going on that caused the speaker to write or create this document? Your intended audience. Who is the speaker addressing and what sort of relationship does the author have with the audience? Okay. The purpose. What was the writer's motive for creating this document? So usually audience and purpose are very well interconnected, but you need to make sure you do address them separately. And then the point of view, what is the author trying to say about this particular issue? Okay, so if you remember HIP and you use all of those, you should have no problem getting those points you need for the documents. And we'll go over this again during our study sessions next week. So I hope this was helpful. I have some examples of point of view here. Tom Ritchie has a good video that I'll be posting about an example of a DBQ and using the rubric. So we have, here's some examples of like point of view. So as a priest, he may have, so first you're stating who the author is, right? Sometimes the documents will have a name. Either underneath it says who the document is by, or by stating the position of a person is saying the author if it doesn't provide a name, and you're not familiar with that person. So you want to look at you want to look to see if there's a name, you want to look to see if there's a date in the document and a place, like where was it written, where was this person from, okay? All of that plays into the context of the document. So as a priest, he may have been criticizing Peter the Great because he was upset about the Tsar's reforms that reduced the power of the Russian Orthodox Church. Okay, so he's going to be criticizing self-interest, right? So as a priest, he's part of the church, and anything that's done to diminish the power of the church affects not only the church in general, but him directly. Okay, so then from that, you would make that connection. You would talk about how this document is biased. So this is a good point of view, and then you can discuss the bias of that. You can't just simply think that it's obvious to the reader. You don't want the reader to have to connect the dots for you. And I'm sure the reader who's also an AP Euro teacher can, but if they have to connect the dots without you actually saying it, then you won't get the point. Okay, so if you feel like you didn't specifically state something and it's more generalized, then state it. Add it in, put an arrow and add it in. Okay. Hopefully this was helpful. Please look out for my sign-up sheet. You will have two, again, options every day. So 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. I'll have different, I'm going to have a different DBQ each day. So it will be required for you to come in twice. So Monday through Friday next week, there'll be 10 times that you can come in. And you have to come in 2 times. So 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Each day will be the same. So it doesn't count if you come in at 1 and 3. You can come in at 1 and 3, but it will be the same document that we're going to be going over. So you're more than welcome if you want extra practice on that same document, but it won't count as your 2 dates. So you do have to come on 2 separate days. So make sure that you look at different DBQs. We'll also be covering each day, focusing a little bit more on one aspect of the DBQ than the other. So maybe one day we'll focus on contextualization overall. One day we might be focusing on that unicorn point, and then at least 3 days we'll be focusing on specifically how to hit those document points, because those are where the bulk of the points come from. Hopefully this video is helpful. If you still have any questions about the things going into next week, please let me know. I will be posting the example DBQ in the morning of each day. So if you could just take a look at it so you're familiar with the documents before you come into our session, that would be helpful. Also, if you want to go through a quick rundown of a document, it's only 45 minutes. So if you want to time yourself, I recommend that you at least do one timed DBQ. See what you can do in 45 minutes, okay? It's imperative that you at least try to do one before the day of the exam. That way you know what to expect. That, wow, I'm spending too much time reviewing the documents, or I'm spending way too much time going to everything I know about this topic and not really focusing on the specific points that I need to hit. It just gives you a little bit more aware of where you should be spending your time. And for the breakdown, I think on Monday, so Monday, May 11th is physics and gov. Now I know none of you are taking those classes except for my seniors or AP Gov, but we'll probably do Monday to do a practice timed one together, since the majority of you will not having AP. So on Tuesday, I think there might be a handful of you that may be in calculus. I can't remember. But I will be offering some things on that Monday and Tuesday leading up to the Euro exam, because I think most of you have AP Bio, which is the following week. And so I think my class will be your first AP exam. Please let me know if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's right, with the exception of maybe less than 5 of you. So we will be using that Monday and Tuesday to do some last minute review and timed DBQs together as well. So again, please look out for my sign-up sheet. I'll be sending it out later today so that you can sign up for next week to join the Zoom sessions. I hope you have a great day. Bye.